It's good to have you back on the morning show here on Arise News. Now, smuggling of migrants has continued to pose a serious challenge to governments and law enforcement in countries, especially south of the Sahara, as a result of disappearing economic opportunities. An increasing number of so-called economically deprived persons are through this way being lured into believing that hopes of survival lie elsewhere. It has become a lucrative racket for gangs of people smugglers whose desperate tactics and schemes to escape interdiction most times lead to disaster for their victims. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Observatory on Smuggling of Migrants in Nigeria is a virtual repository that focuses on tracking incidences, trends and patterns of irregular migration in the country. It offers up-to-date data and analyses that could aid policy formulation and projection relating to migration management in the country. Now, 3 phases of primary field research on migrant smuggling from, through and to Nigeria were carried out by the UNODC Observatory on Smuggling of Migrants. And on Tuesday next week, that observatory will be unveiled as part of the coordinated global charge towards tackling the menace. Well, joining us now to have a discussion are Claire Healy, who is coordinator UNODC Observatory on Smuggling of Migrants, and Dr. Adeniran, National Research Consultant at UNODC. Welcome to you both. Let's have your thoughts on the late Queen Elizabeth. What was her relationship with other regions within the UK, Ireland, Scotland, and the like?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Where I'm
Ireland
has been independent for over 100 years.
Independent for over 100 years from the United Kingdom, but Ireland maintains a close relationship, of course, with the neighbour.
All right, let's move into the discussion for today. Let's bring Dr. Adeniran in. Now, of course, we're talking about smuggling of persons. What specific situations or scenarios can be described or identified as cases of migrant smuggling? And what are some of the key drivers that could possibly influence these situations?
Okay, thank you very much. Smuggling of migrants is naturally regarded as a variant of the larger illegal or irregular migration phenomenon. And the basic determinant of smuggling of migrants is the voluntary connotation of the process. In other words, individuals routinely make themselves available for the smuggling process. But if there's element of force engaged in it, it naturally dovetails to what we call trafficking in persons. But for smuggling of migrants, the underlying determinant is the voluntary connotation of the process. And in terms of drivers, it depends on the context from which we are looking at it. In the context of Nigeria, we have discovered that basic underlying determinants have remained active. In other words, we see economic determinants playing a major role in individuals facilitating or engaging in smuggling of migrants. What do I mean by economic determinants? When you see issue relating to increasing inflation rate in the country, which was at the last count in July 2022, calculated at 19.64%, it's an issue when it comes to driving forces of smuggling of migrants. Also, when you see what we call the purchasing power parity in the country, which was as of the last count, stood at 152.6, LCU, this a big facilitator or stimulator of smuggling of migrants in the country. And also, more importantly, when you see the rate of unemployment in the country, last calculated at 33.3%, it's a big issue when it comes to smuggling of migrants. All of this in combination stimulate the process. But aside from economic determinants, we also look at the socio-political context. As you are aware, the university students have been at home for more than 6 months. It's an issue of interest when it comes to drivers of smuggling of migrants in the country. Also, when you look at the governance procedure in the country, to what extent is the governance structure supportive of youth, expressing themselves in terms of economic participation, in terms of economic empowerment? When you put all of these determinants together, the extent of activeness of all these determinants in the country have ensured that smuggling of migrants has remained a thriving process, a thriving endeavor within the context of Nigeria.
Indeed, Dr. Adeniran just ruled out some statistics there, but Claire, specifically, how grave are the numbers regarding smuggling of people in Nigeria, and to what extent, how serious is the problem currently?
Yeah, so we conducted research over the past 3 or 4 years looking at the situation in Nigeria. As Dr. Adeniran has set out, what are the drivers of people, needing to or feeling the need to emigrate irregularly, and why they contact smugglers. We also conducted research in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Libya, to look at what's happening along the route. It's interesting because we've seen increasing reports of migrant smuggling by air to the Middle East, particularly from north central, northwest states. And at the same time, we've seen a decrease in the number of Nigerians who are traveling across the Mediterranean. So from Libya, Tunisia, and crossing the Mediterranean on that very dangerous journey, being smuggled to southern Europe. So it's a mixed situation. There's increased law enforcement, there's increased border enforcement, which makes it more difficult for smugglers to operate and more difficult for migrants to travel. And at the same time, we have, Nigerians moving within the ECOWAS free movement area to other West African states, where if they can travel regularly, if they have their passport, if they cross an official border crossing, they have the possibility to travel regularly. But in some cases, unfortunately, because of corruption, because of insecurity, they may still have to engage smugglers and take a more clandestine route.
Right, Claire, that's a very disheartening reality as we can see now. But as we know, the UN ODC Observatory has carried out 3 phases of primary field research on migrant smuggling from, through and to Nigeria. Could you talk us through what each of these phases entail? And Dr. Adeniran can take this, please.
Yes, so Dr. Adeniran and colleagues conducted research in 2019 and in 2021 for the first 2 phases, interviewing both the different stakeholders around Nigeria, so Nigeria Immigration Service, the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, the police forces, NGOs and civil society who have some information about smuggling of migrants. We followed that up then in 2021 in partnership with the Mixed Migration Centre, conducting surveys of over 700 Nigerians who were at different points along the route. So they may have been in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Libya, asking them questions about, for example, how much did you pay the smuggler? What kind of dangers did you experience? And there, of course, we have some very concerning reports of abuses perpetrated by smugglers, but also by other actors in this context. They were also surveyed and asked, how did you first meet the smuggler? And we have a very clear understanding now of the modus operandi of migrant smugglers from Nigeria, where they, a local agent in the state of origin of the intending migrant will get in touch, or the migrant is put in touch with them through family or the network, and they are then paid at the location of origin. They basically just give a phone number to the migrant to contact the next person along the route, maybe in Kano, and then so on as they cross into Niger and travel further north.
Indeed, interesting perspective, Claire. Now, Dr. Adeniran, let's talk about the UNODC launching of the Observatory on Smuggling of Migrants in Nigeria. What are the main objectives here?
Thank you very much. The launch on the procedure just want to make available the report of the investigations conducted so far between 2019 and 2021. And as earlier referenced, the observatory is essentially a virtual resource, an open resource center where individual researchers and institutions can actually access information and data from this observatory, possibly for policy projection, possibly for individual research purposes. So for this observatory, all issues, up-to-date information, real-time data on issue bordering on smuggling of migrants to Nigeria, from Nigeria, and through Nigeria. In other words, we are talking about our country of origin, transiting locations, and also country receiving smuggled migrants. Nigeria plays active role when it comes to these three reflections of an SOM across the region. And for the observatory, it's a whole pool of resources regarding SOM, SOM, that is smuggling of migrants, that having to do with Nigerians, and for also all other nationals that transit through Nigeria. As a case reference, it would be interesting to note that when you talk about smuggling of migrants in Nigeria, it is not only Nigerians that are actually involved. When you go to the northern region of the country, precisely Kano, that is regarded as a significant transiting route, you discover that Cameroonians play a significant role when it comes to transiting through Nigeria towards Sahara, when it comes to smuggling of migrants, to the extent that our investigation discovered that there is a kind of enclave in Kano, whereby you have participants who are actually of Cameroonian origins, and also victims that are actually of Cameroonian origins, using Nigerian space to conduct smuggling of migrants. So for the observatory, all necessary information regarding the routes. When we mention the routes for conducting smuggling of migrants in the country, the usual thinking is that, oh, the movement towards the northern region, towards Sahara. But our investigation has been able to discover that it is not so. We now have an emerging pattern that utilizes the southern part of the country, precisely Oron in Akwa Ibom State, to smuggle individuals away from Nigeria. Even for movement that is targeting Europe, you see individuals first going southward towards Central African Republic, all the way back to Saharan region. So for the observatory, you have some information on what constitutes the routes for smuggling. You have information on who actually are the smugglers. It would be interesting that we have individuals that are below 18 years of age who are actually involved in smuggling of people. It would be interesting to see that individuals who are older, 60 years plus, who are involved in smuggling of migrants. Also, the modus operandi, earlier referred to by Claire, you see the procedure. What constitutes the mode of operation of smugglers in the country? How do they carry out these activities? The information will be available on the observatory, and it's going to be an open access and resource center. Also, it will be interesting to understand that the procedure for making payment for smuggling of migrants services. We have the information on the site. And also, aside from the monetary connotation, our research has discovered that there's also a non-monetary procedure, even for making payment for services rendered. For instance, we have detected cases of labor exploitation that ordinarily shouldn't have formed part of an SOM research, but our investigation revealed that labor exploitation, it's a form of payment which is essentially non-monetary when it comes to services bordering on smuggling of migrants. Also, we have information on victims on the observatory. For instance, our investigation has discovered that all of the victims that we detected in Nigeria, about 49.5% were actually female, while 50.5% were male. In other words, we have both male and female categories almost being in equal half. Also, in terms of the major findings from the study, we have issue regarding to what serves as motivators for individuals presenting themselves to be smuggled, but also have why are they actually sustaining the process? How do they sustain the process? All of this information are available on the observatory.
All right, Dr. Adeniran, that sounds like a very robust and detailed analysis. But of course, let's talk about the utility of that information. Now, of course, you did mention that the data and analysis of the observatory collects could aid policy formulation relating to migration management in the country. Could we get an indication of how this data is currently being utilized policy-wise so far? How receptive has this government been towards it?
Thank you. You know, all along, UNODC has been an active partner of various institutions in Nigeria helping institutions in the country in the aspect of capacity building when it comes to data management and also analysis relating to migration-connected cases in the country. So hitherto, UNODC has ensured that relevant institutions in the country have been assessing relevant data for policy-related issues. But this observatory, it's a bit, I would call it a higher version of our partnership so far. In other words, as soon as it is launched, we have full of information on this observatory. And since it's an open access resource center, all the institutions can have access to it. And for example, when you talk about the victims, who are the victims of smuggling of migrants in the country, when you look at the age categorization, it will be interesting to find out that we have individuals who are not even of age, individuals who are below 18 years of age, falling victims. Also, we have individuals who are as old as 60, 70 years old, falling victims. When you talk about policy projections in this context, the government should be able to know where to focus their attention when it comes to procedure for mitigating SOM cases in the country. We are just meant to make information available. We are meant to make data available and for utilization by relevant agencies. We are not implementers of these policies, but any relevant policy connecting to what we are focusing on when it comes to the observatory on smuggling of migrants in the country. For mitigation, government institutions can access the observatory. For prevention, government institutions can access the observatory. And I quickly like to add this, when it comes to issues relating to capacity for investigating SOM cases in the country, when it comes to capacity for prosecuting SOM cases in the country, and when it comes to capacity for preventing SOM cases in the country, UNODC has been active, partnering with relevant government agencies like Nigerian Immigration Service, like NATIP, and associated agencies on how they can actually carry out investigations on their own, research on their own, and make it available for policy issues in the country.
Indeed, Dr. Adeniran. Now, Claire, earlier on you mentioned that this issue is beyond Nigeria. So in view of this, what partnership and collaborations are there in the fight against people smuggling, on a global scale?
Yes, so of course, I mean, by its nature, smuggling of migrants is defined in the UN protocols as the facilitation of an irregular entry into another country for a profit. Okay, so it always involves crossing into or staying in a country irregularly and a criminal facilitating that process. This means that it requires, of course, cross-border cooperation. We've been working at UNODC, we've been working with Nigeria Immigration Service in particular to build their capacity to collaborate with neighbouring countries, with countries further afield where Nigerians are smuggled to, with other neighbouring countries like Cameroon or Chad where people are smuggled into Nigeria. This is of course key. I mentioned before, the difference between, on the one hand, the possibility to move regularly within the ECOWAS free movement zone for all ECOWAS citizens, and on the other hand, this situation where because of insecurity, because of corruption, people end up entering irregularly and needing the assistance of a smuggler. This also, of course, requires us to work closely with the ECOWAS Commission to ensure that ECOWAS free movement rights are respected. And then, of course, when it comes to the criminal activities, both the crime of smuggling itself, which is the crime of facilitating irregular entry, a crime against the state, and situations where Nigerians and others are victims of human rights abuses in this context of smuggling. This is very important to investigate and to prosecute, and in many cases will require law enforcement cooperation across borders within West Africa and with other regions. UNODC is always ready to support and facilitate that collaboration. And of course, as Dr. Adeniran has very clearly set out, this has to be based on the facts. It has to be based on how does smuggling function from Nigeria in other countries, who are the actors, the criminal actors involved. They might be Nigerian, they might be other West Africans, they might be Europeans or from the Middle East. It's very important to understand these perpetrators, to understand who are the migrants being smuggled, what are the abuses taking place, and of course, as well as law enforcement, to protect people who are victims of abuses in this context.
All right, Claire, let's stay with you on that. Talking about victims and protection, let's talk about sensitization. How much long-term work on enlightenment is out there for victims of migrant smuggling? And how receptive would you say they have been to this information? It sounds as though anybody could become a victim at some point. But let's talk about that enlightenment. How much of it is being put out there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, we make a distinction. At UNODC, we work on trafficking in persons, where you can become a victim of trafficking for exploitation. In smuggling of migrants, we don't actually talk about a victim. We talk about a migrant who you know, is the object of a crime. They're smuggled. But as Dr. Adeniran presented, it's more of a voluntary situation, in the sense that we can think of a migrant smuggler as a travel agent, but as a criminal travel agent, right? So they're facilitating a trip that is actually irregular, and in doing so, they're committing a crime against the state. What we need to look at in terms of enlightenment, and the Nigeria Immigration Service is kicking off some really interesting work in terms of enlightenment and sensitization around migrant smuggling. And I think, you know, it has to go two ways. It has to be we need to avoid getting involved in this criminal business of migrant smuggling. And this is really important as a message to intending migrants. But at the same time, we need to offer an alternative to these people. And here we have to look at the possibilities for regular migration within the ECOWAS region, provided that somebody has their travel document, has their health certificate, and crosses at a regular border. Then this is regular movement. We have no crime, and we have prevented migrant smuggling. So I think this is really important to make sure people understand traveling within the ECOWAS space regularly, traveling with a visa, and on the other hand, I think as policymakers, governments and the UN have to promote legal pathways and ways for people to travel regularly. This is one of the best ways of preventing this criminal business. The second approach, I think, is, you know, informing people about regular means of travel, but at the same time making sure they can travel in safety, and making sure that, you know, that the situation is free of corruption. Because a very interesting finding from our research across West and North Africa is that when people are asked, well, why did you use a smuggler? Maybe you could have traveled regularly. Maybe you could have traveled independently, but without using a smuggler. And they mostly replied, well, it's because I'm afraid that we're going to be asked for bribes, and I'm afraid of insecurity and violence along the route. And so I see this criminal actor, a smuggler, as sort of somebody who can protect me in this. So I feel like paying, and we found that Nigerians paid on average about $610 US for their smuggler, and they felt that this was money well spent in terms of securing their protection and making sure that they didn't have to pay a higher bribe because the smuggler could negotiate a lower bribe. So I think these are very concerning issues. So I think we need to have a two-pronged approach where there's sensitization, and the Nigerian government is doing very good work on that, to tell people, you know, don't get involved with these criminals. If you need to move, then try to move regularly. And on the other hand, you know, we need to improve the situation whereby people don't feel so insecure that they cannot travel regularly and need to go to smugglers to assist them.
Understood.
Yeah, indeed, interesting revelations there. Claire Healy, coordinator of the UNODC Observatory in Smuggling of Migrants, and of course Dr. Adeniran, National Research Consultant with the UNODC. I'd like to thank you very much for you both for coming to the morning show. It's good to have you.